of light. I can clearly hear you whisper in my ear. You are not alone now, have no fear. Angel of light. Oh, pray my heart. Love me tonight. Angel of light. I've reveled in the darkness, fed my demons there, burning up the highway, going nowhere. Angel of light. Oh, pray my hold me tonight. Angel of light.
Well, we want to welcome you today to this episode of The Healing Hour. We are delighted to have you joining us today for this episode with Shelley Tatelbaulm and Margaret Donor. And we want to thank today our sponsors. Our first sponsor is Partners in Massage, which is located at 4415 Albany Post Road, Route 9 in Hyde Park, 229-9133. Partners in Massage, where you can get Swedish massage, deep tissue massage, hot stone massage, reflexology, and every kind of healing and loving work. And Shelley will attest to that, right?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. It is the place to go to revive your body and your soul.
So if you need medical massage or you just need to relax and de-stress, call Partners in Massage at 229-9133. And Shelley is delighted to welcome her new sponsors, two of her new sponsors, and I'm going to let her take over and say a word about her sponsors now.
And I'm really grateful for these sponsors. Thank you so much for having faith in us in this program. And the first one is the New York State Solar Farm, making solar affordable for every homeowner. Actually, you can save from day one with their new solar energy lease program, with no money out of your pocket and savings from day one. So you can request a free iQuote today and get it tomorrow by visiting www.nyssf.com, or you can call their solar professionals at 877-SOLAR-95. 877-SOLAR-95. Lease your solar, love your energy bill. And the second sponsor is Basic Glass Core, a commercial architectural glass company that supplies and installs all of your commercial needs, from aluminum storefronts, aluminum doors, and beautiful skylights. So for more information, please visit them at www.basecglass, that's BASECGLASS.com.
Thank you, Shelley, and I encourage everybody to support our wonderful sponsors that we have so much gratitude for today. we're going to be speaking today about what's called the 4 and now the 5 agreements. Some of you probably have heard of that because the 4 agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz that book was on the bestseller list for many, many years. And there are many people who are currently using these 4 agreements to make their life run more smoothly, maybe just the easiest way to say it. And Shelley Tatelbaulm is a certified instructor, having studied with Don Miguel Ruiz, and she offers workshops and teachings in the 4 and 5 agreements. So I'm going to turn this over to Shelley for a moment and ask her to please tell us a little bit about Don Miguel Ruiz and what these 4 and 5 agreements are, and a little bit about how we can apply them to our life. So Shelley, if you want to explain that to us, it would be wonderful. Thank you so much for bringing this information.
Well, it's my pleasure, of course, to be able to share wisdom to help people improve the quality of their lives. As a grief therapist, I interface and use these 5 agreements as well as teach them in groups. As a matter of fact, Margaret, you and I are going to be doing an open house at Partners in Massage on Sunday, where I will be talking about the 5 agreements, and people will be able to experience a lot of the modalities that you offer at Partners in Massage. So you can learn more about it this coming Sunday from 1 to 3 at Partners.
Right at Partners in Massage on Route 9 in Hyde Park. Right.
So, but to go on to the 5 agreements, I've been studying with Don Miguel since 1990. I read his book, The 4 Agreements, and I knew immediately that this was a person that I needed to get to know. Actually, it's a funny story. Andrew Weil, years ago, told a story about how he could never find 4-leaf clovers. It was frustrating to him. And then one day he saw a woman in a field, and she was collecting all of these 4-leaf clovers. And he says, how does she do that? So he spent the day with her. He said, can I sit and watch how you do this? I want to learn how to do this. And she said, of course. And at the end of the day, he was picking 4-leaf clovers. So he said the moral of that story was that when you want something, you go to somebody who's already doing it.
That's a great one.
So for me, it was, I read Don Miguel's book, and it was like, yes, I need to be able to be with this person and really, really get to understand on a deeper level what these 4 agreements are. And then, of course, he wrote the latest book, The 5th Agreement. So let me explain them to you. The first agreement is to be impeccable with your word. And what that really means is to become aware of every single word that we're using. Every word has power. So if you look in the mirror and you say, I'm ugly today, and you're not realizing that you're saying I'm ugly today, then you're giving yourself a very negative message just starting off your day. Or if you say, God, this is so hard, life's so hard, that word hard carries a lot of energy with it. If you change the word to challenge, life is challenging, it's different. That word has a different energy. It feels differently in your body, right, Margaret?
Right. Challenge makes me feel like it's something that I have to meet, but there's a possibility of my understanding it or overcoming it or working with that challenge to better myself, whereas hard almost feels like a boulder I have to roll uphill and I'll never manage.
That's right. And that's just the power of the word.
Right.
The power of the word. First comes the word. And so it's very important that we become very aware of the words that we're using, what we're saying to other people. And interestingly enough, so many people get the impression when you're talking about impeccability of the word, it's really about what you say to others. But actually, it goes deeper than that. What are we saying to ourselves? What kind of messages and words are we using? I can't do this. I'm so dumb. I hear people in my grieving practice saying, I will never be happy again.
I've had so many people lately, it must be in the air because I've heard so many people lately say, I'm realizing that if I don't love myself, it starts with me. And if I don't love myself, I cannot love anything outside of myself. And so that's kind of what you're talking about, right? Is being impeccable with yourself too. Loving yourself and saying nice things to yourself.
Well, you know, in Don Miguel's Circle of Fire prayer, one of the sentences in there is beginning with myself and continuing with my brothers and sisters.
Right.
And so it really is about beginning with ourselves. We can't really understand what compassion is unless we learn how to become compassionate to ourselves.
It must be in every tradition, because love thy neighbor as thyself is really saying the same thing, you know?
It is. Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're all truths.
Right.
Don Miguel is actually not telling us any truths that have not already been told centuries ago. He's just putting it in a different language right
And we
now.
always need to rehear them and be reminded. There's no doubt. I wanted to just say that I have a good friend who told me the other day that she gets up every morning with the Four Agreements book, and she reads through them to remind herself of them each morning and how she chooses to behave. She says it seems simple, but it can be a challenge. Even that first one, to be impeccable with your word, can challenge us at every moment.
Well, the thing about Don Miguel's work is that when you first read it, it's such an easy read, and people believe that, oh, this is easy, until they actually start to practice it. So let me just run through them, and then we can
That'd be
go into them,
great.
so we're not talking about something vague here.
Yes.
The 5 agreements are: be impeccable with your word, to not take things personally,
Big one.
don't make assumptions,
Big one.
always do your best.
Yep, pretty big one.
And the last one is actually to become skeptical, but listen. Don't believe everything you hear,
Right. But listen and be
but
open.
listen and discern it for yourself. Feel
Right.
it to find if it's your truth, but just don't automatically listen to it and believe it.
Right. Good.
So those are basically the 5 agreements. And
They're good.
excuse me, I know, for example, a lot of people have some challenges with the not taking things personally.
Boy, that seems to be the biggest one, because I've had people say to me, why wouldn't I take it personally? Somebody just insulted me. So why shouldn't I take that personally? And certainly we can all understand that point of view, right? So maybe you can address that idea.
Well, my favorite is actually the not taking it personally one, because I have always found that one particularly the most challenging one in my own life.
Yeah.
And so it's when you begin to understand that things are not just about you. Somebody might be having a very, very bad day, and you're just in the way, and you get that nasty remark, and you take it personally and think that person doesn't like me, or maybe they don't like what I'm wearing, when actually it has absolutely nothing to do with you. It's that they had a fight with their wife before, or their husband before they saw you, and they're carrying that over, and you're just the object of their frustration.
Right. And then I think on the bigger, now this maybe is a little bit bigger, because sometimes they are directing it at you, right? I mean, it isn't because they had a fight with their husband or wife. They
True.
really feel that way about you. So then I've always thought that there's a concept or an idea that we are mirroring for each other, and that when we hate something in someone else, it's because we hate it in ourselves. That somehow it wouldn't, I guess the best way to say it is that 2 people can be looking at the same person, and one person will say, boy, I really like that person. And the other person will say, oh boy, I really don't like that person. Now the person hasn't changed. The person is the same, but it's the viewers that are changing that person, which has always led me to believe exactly what you're saying, that it's not the person being viewed, but it's the opinion or the point of view of the viewer. So you
Correct.
can't take it personally, because even if you were Jesus himself, there would be a lot of people who don't like you just because you're mirroring something for them they don't like in themselves. Would you agree that has something to do with it?
I do. I definitely agree with that point of view, and I'll take it a little bit further in the fact that everything is about our interpretation. We may all have the same perception. For example, if we all look at a tree, we've all agreed, actually, to call it a tree in our English language. If somebody said that word tree in Japanese, we wouldn't know what they were talking about.
Right.
So we've made an agreement that this is a tree.
Right.
And let's say, Margaret, that you had a tree when you were a little girl, and you were climbing that tree and you broke your arm, fell
Right,
down.
right.
And so you had a very negative experience of a tree. And every time now you see a tree, you hate trees because you're reminded of that experience.
Right.
Let's say I was a little girl and I had a tree outside my house, and my father built me a tree house in that tree.
right.
And every time I see a tree, I love trees. It brings back a great memory. So we're both perceiving the tree.
Right.
But because of your experience in your life, you're interpreting it from one point of view, and I'm interpreting it from another point of view. But the tree by itself is neutral.
Right. It's so funny, because have you ever had people say to you, or someone say, oh, I'm going to name my child Sarah, for example. And one person will say, oh, I hate that name because there was a girl in my first grade who used to pick on me named Sarah. And now they'll never name their child Sarah. And the other person says, oh, my cousin was named Sarah and I loved her. So I love the name Sarah. And I think it's kind of what you're talking about, personalizing something which in a sense is truly neutral.
That's right. So how can we then take it personally?
Right.
Because somebody else may be interpreting us from their point of view, according to their past experience in their life, and we're just a reminder of that experience. So we're the object of it. We're not the cause of it.
Right. And it does hurt our feelings, though, on a human level when someone says, oh, you are fill in the blank, whatever it is. And that's what I think we're talking about, right, is somehow, well, we have to recognize maybe that there is a moment of hurt, certainly even in the most evolved of us, but how we react to that hurt or those feelings, isn't that really part of it as well, how we react to it?
Well, Don Miguel would say that if you were actually using that fifth agreement about becoming skeptical about what people are saying, that you can actually create some immunity from that.
Okay.
Because once you have awareness that people are coming from a different point of view and you're really skeptical about what they're saying because you don't know what is behind it, that grants you the immunity that you don't have to go into a reaction and you don't have to feel bad. But that's a process. I mean, I've been working this program with Don Miguel for, 12 years? And I still observe how my body wants to go into a little reaction and take it personally, but I've learned to recognize that sensation in my body and say, oh, there that is, that taking it personally thing again. This isn't really about me.
Right.
It's about them. And
Right.
so I can just kind of blow it off. Unless,
Right.
of course, it hits a wound in myself that I'm
Right.
agreeing with.
Right.
And then that's a whole different story.
So in other words, what you mean by hits a wound in myself that I'm agreeing with is that unless you are in agreement with what they're saying to you because you realize that there's some truth to it.
That's right. That's how you get hooked. Is
Okay.
if you have abandonment issues
Okay.
because you had
Parents that abandoned you or something like that.
exactly right.
Right.
Then when you are having a conversation with somebody and they walk away from you in anger, then you might experience that as an abandonment when all they're doing is walking away from you.
Right. So it becomes even deeper because it's triggering the initial hurt that we're calling the parental abandonment.
That's right. Or we're also calling the wound.
The wound, right.
That's the origin of the wound.
Right. But what if somebody is actually saying something to us that, now I know that truth is held in the consciousness of the beholder. I understand that. But let's say that we've done something that is hurtful or is mean or is greedy, and somebody calls us on it. Our first reaction is often to become very defensive, even though, and usually defensiveness even more so comes out of guilt, right? There's some part of us that's, as you're saying, agreeing
shame.
with it or shame. So we defend it. But isn't there a place in this agreement number 2, don't take things personally, isn't there a place for also recognizing when in fact someone is pointing out something that might have a little sniggling bit of truth to it and perhaps we might learn by listening?
Well, once again, we're going to go back to the first agreement of impeccability of the word.
Okay.
And so we need to make sure that what they're saying to us is impeccable and is a clear mirror.
Right.
And if it is something is being mirrored back to us that we need to take responsibility for, which actually, from my point of view, means that it's actually our ability to respond. Responsibility does not need to be a burden. It actually offers us an opportunity to show our ability to respond and be able to say, wow, I said that. I really need to go back inside and figure out where that came from. Why was I saying that? As we become more evolved, as we become more aware, then we are able to take more responsibility for the impeccability of our word. And if we're not taking it personally, then we're able also to take more responsibility with what we're doing with our actions, our thoughts, and our words.
Right.
But what I'd like to say here, Margaret, is that this is a talk show, and we would love to have people calling in. So I just want to give the number here to call in if you have any questions about these 5 agreements or
Oh,
have a question
wonderful.
for Margaret or I.
Yeah.
And that number would be 471-9500. So once again, 471-9500 if anybody would like to call in with any questions about this while Margaret and I are discussing it.
If you're working with Don Miguel's 4 or 5 agreements, if you are wanting to work with them, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to call in, and you can talk with us at 471-9500. Thanks, Shelley. I think we certainly probably stimulated a lot of thought in people already. They'll have questions.
Well, there are
Definitely.
lots of questions, but isn't that a wonderful thing? Because it's by asking these questions that we expand our awareness, and we can actually learn how to live heaven right here on earth instead of having to die to go to heaven.
Right.
We can. That's one of the reasons Don Miguel wrote this book, was a roadmap for people to become personally free from their past. This
Right.
offered them the opportunity by these 5 agreements to do that. Isn't that amazing?
It is. And as we've said before, they appear to be simple and certainly something that we can want to carry with us and try to uphold and look at our behavior in light of these. Now, what was the 3rd agreement?
Don't make assumptions.
Don't make assumptions, because that seems to tie in very closely, obviously, with the don't take things personally, the assumption that perhaps it's about you or that this event is about you, when in fact it may really have not much to do with you at all. You just happen to be in the way, as you said,
Right.
and you're just the punching bag of the moment. So the assumption one, agreement 3, probably has to be integrated as well in order to hold agreement 1 and 2 correctly. Would you say that's true? Or
I would, and the thing about the don't make assumptions is that one's fairly easy from the point of view of ask for clarity. Don't make an assumption. Ask for clarity.
Right.
Don't assume somebody's angry at you. Ask them, are you angry with me right now?
Right.
Or don't make an assumption that your husband should be able to read your mind.
Right.
You know, tell him what's on your mind.
Right.
You know, so it's the asking for clarity piece of it that is so helpful in not making assumptions.
Right. It's interesting that you bring that up about husbands and wives, because one thing I've noticed over
Or
the
any
years,
partners.
yeah, or any partners in helping people, is that, but particularly in a husband and wife where you're so close and you've known each other for so long, and oftentimes I've heard a husband and wife say about their partner, "Oh, they don't understand what I'm into. They don't understand it. They won't. I don't even talk to them about it because they don't get it," which is indeed definitely an assumption, and you're not giving the opportunity for your partner to grow along with you. Mm-hmm. You're assuming, if you've been married for 30 or 40 years, that person is still the way they were 30 or 40 years ago, but maybe they've changed. You won't know if you keep assuming or making an assumption about their thoughts and behavior. Do you think that's true too? Or?
We create a lot of suffering by making assumptions. That's the bottom line. And that's why communication, and here we go back again with the rest of the agreements, impeccability of the word.
Right.
Use your word. Ask questions. Being able to communicate with your heart open instead of your heart closed and so defensive.
Right.
Also, Don Miguel has, pointed out to me on several times to become curious, not defensive. Become inspired, not
Right.
jealous.
Right.
You know, there's different ways of just turning it around and looking at it from a different point of view.
So the idea of, if somebody is doing or has something that you want, rather than hating them for having it, let them serve as a beacon of inspiration to help you to get where you want to go,
That's right.
rather than seeing it as a competition. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Right.
To become so inspired. If that person can do that, then how did they get to do that? I'm so inspired by that. That's the story I was telling you with Andrew Weil. You know, that's an inspiring story. If somebody has something that you want or they're doing it, rather than becoming jealous of it, go find out about it.
Right.
Be able to co-create together and communicate together so that you can grow and evolve as a human.
So really, what I'm hearing is that we are all creating our own suffering over and over and over again and blaming it on other people. Is that too broad a statement?
No, that's not too broad a statement, but I will say that as a grief therapist, what I tell my clients all the time is that pain is completely unavoidable.
Right.
If I kick you, I'm going to hurt you.
Right.
But then if you tell me a story about how you're always getting kicked around in life and why are you always having bad things happening to you,
Right.
now you're telling yourself a suffering story
Right.
about the pain.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
see? That's how we create suffering.
You get caught in that victim consciousness. If it happens to me, I'm going to keep drawing it to me over and over and over so that I can tell everybody how I suffer.
And then when you keep telling your next door neighbor how terrible it was, and then you tell your best friend how terrible it was, and then you tell your mother how terrible it was, you're reliving that every time you tell the story.
Right. And
then you suffer more.
but then you become addicted to drawing the attention through the victim to you, I think.
And the drama.
And the drama to you through that. So it's so important that, again, to me, this goes back to really loving yourself. And if you love yourself and then you yourself will want to do what it is you need to do to heal. You won't want to do what it is that keeps re-wounding you. So if you're really loving yourself, you'll move towards the healing and the mastery and the empowerment, and you'll move away from being a victim all the time.
What you're saying is so true, Margaret, but when I hear you speak about loving yourself, so many people that I speak to hate themselves.
Yeah, I know.
And so getting to that loving yourself, how do we do that? How do we get to love ourselves when we're, aging or old or fat or skinny or wrinkled or have a low-paying job or we can't support our families? I mean, so many people hate themselves. And that, to me, is one of the greatest limitations and sources of suffering there is.
I couldn't agree with you more. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, Shelley and I will be talking about how we can do more of that, loving ourselves and healing during the healing hour. We want to thank our sponsors again, Partners in Massage. Partners in Massage is located at 4415 Albany Post Road, Route 9, just south of the Vanderbilt Mansion in Hyde Park. From massage and health care of all types, 229-9133, and also our two other sponsors.
The New York State Solar Farm, making the solar affordable for every homeowner, and they are www.nyssf.com. You can do it free, I quote today, or you can call their solar professionals at 877-SOLAR, SOLAR, 95. And the other sponsor is Basic Glass Corporation, which is a commercial architectural glass company that supplies and installs all your commercial needs from aluminum storefronts, aluminum doors, and skylights. And they can be visited at www.basicglass.com.
Enjoy this beautiful song about the Archangel Raphael, the angel of healing, and Shelley and I will return in 4 minutes. I am the Archangel Raphael, and it is my job to guide you to the healing waters of love. Call me forth when the fever rages inside of you, and lie down in the cool waters of my open arms.
It is time for you to remember the unity of all that is. When you're lost in the maze of existence, lie down in my arms. I will cradle you as a mother cradles her child. Where there is pain, open to the light. Where there is fear, surrender. Where there's noise, disappear. Disappear in the calmness of love. The healing of your heart and the healing of your mind is a journey within. Stop for a moment and look inside yourself. Look inside to find the source of pain. Look inside to find the source of healing. The path of healing lies within your heart. Where there's pain, open to the light. Where there is fear, surrender. Where there is noise, disappear. Disappear in the calmness of love. I'll cradle you, surround you with love. Invite the healing energy of my love. Invite the healing of God's love. There's a place of unity, of reconciliation, a wholeness and health and healing. This place I will take you. Reach out your hand to me. Where there's pain, open to the light. Where there is fear, surrender. Where there is noise, disappear. Disappear in the calmness of love. Disappear in the calmness of love.
I am the Archangel Raphael, and it is my job to guide you to the healing waters of love. Call me forth when the fever rages inside of you, and lie down in the cool waters of my open arms. We're back with the Healing Hour with Shelley Tatelbaulm and Margaret Donor. We're so delighted that you've tuned in with us today. We are here to talk about ways to bring our hearts into alignment with our minds, our spirit, our emotional body, our physical body, our mental body, our spiritual body into alignment so that we can all feel better and get through the challenges, as Shelley likes to call them.
My favorite word.
Challenges of life with more grace and more ease. Shelley Tatelbaulm, who is speaking today about her work with Don Miguel Ruiz, the author of the four agreements and the fifth agreement. Now there are 5 agreements. And we have been discussing how we can love ourselves. How can we love ourselves more so that we can love others more? Because that is a challenge. So before the break, we were discussing that. I'm going to turn it back over to Shelley and see if she can answer her own question, which is, if I don't love myself because I don't like what I'm doing, or I don't like what I've done, or I don't like the way I look, how can we alter that so that we can begin not only to love ourselves, but to love the world a little bit more, and to feel that our energy is more creative and positive in the world? So take it away, Shelley.
As you were speaking, Margaret, I was thinking to myself, or actually more accurately, I was feeling that we're talking about loving ourselves, and so many people don't even like themselves. So how do we get from like to love? And the bottom line is that we tell stories about ourselves and we believe them. Mm-hmm. It is all story. Every story that we tell that is negative is going to create suffering. So whenever you look in the mirror and you say, I hate myself, or I hate the way I look, you're going against yourself. And I believe that when people start to realize how abusive they are to themselves, would you walk up to somebody else and say, you are so ugly? Chances are that if you're a healthy person, that you would never do that. And so why would we do that to ourselves?
I guess because we don't fight back.
I believe that we're just not aware.
We're just not aware of what we're doing?
We're just not aware. It becomes a habit.
Right.
It just becomes a habit. You look in the mirror and you automatically say, I hate myself.
Have you heard about these water crystal experiments by Emoto is his last name, which is exactly what you're saying, that our bodies actually, it's been proven that our thoughts, not even just our words, but even our thoughts, have the power to impact our reality. And because our bodies are primarily water, and water is highly mutable, our thoughts about ourselves and our words about ourselves literally even change our cellular makeup, which I think is an amazing thought.
Margaret, I just love you. I love that you just came up with that point of view, because that is a whole nother topic that you and I are going to take on.
Well,
this
we're going to
program.
take that on.
We're going to take that on in terms of our thoughts creating our reality.
Right.
And there we go back to the impeccability of the word.
Right.
The words create thoughts.
Right.
Thoughts then create experiences, and experiences then create our reality.
And thoughts create words.
Right.
And words create experiences, and words create our reality. And it's all tied in, and we all walk around going,
That's exactly right. So here we are. Here we are once again in terms of, so how do we begin loving ourselves or even liking ourselves?
Well, to me, you do things that you like, do things that make you proud of yourself and that don't leave you in a sense of shame. I think self-shame and self-blame is one of the most poisonous, psychological expressions we can have. And once you start blaming or shaming yourself, it's very hard to break that pattern.
If you're not, you have to have the awareness that you're doing that.
Right.
Well.
Yep. Awareness.
That's where it all begins,
Okay.
is to become aware, because we are like robots. Mm-hmm. We are on automatic. Mm-hmm. We believe that everything the mind is saying to us, we must believe it must be true.
Right.
If the mind is speaking to us and telling us this, it must be true.
Right.
And that is a big lie.
Right.
And that's what we need to become skeptical of.
I'm ready to do a whole show on that too, about how we're programmed as robots, but that's a whole different one.
Tune in. We have lots of great programs for you to help you live your heaven here on earth, that's for sure, and be free from the past.
So we've gone through Don Miguel. We've gone through the first a little bit. I'm sure we can do many shows on this, the impeccability of the word. And don't take things personally, and don't make assumptions. Mm-hmm. And then what's number 4?
Always do your best.
And if you always do your best, I think that's going to also eliminate that feeling of shame and self-blame.
That's right. But in my groups, people have real trouble with always do your best, because they feel that that's an excuse, that people, they could always do better. So what does do your best mean? I could always do it better.
I did my best, so that lets me off the hook. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Or they put themselves down because they know they could do it better, and it's not their best.
Right. So
you see?
Right. So you're saying, oh, by the way, if you want to call in, 471-9500, 471-9500 to ask Shelley any questions. I forgot to say that. So I did my best, right? I remembered now.
Yeah.
I inserted it. And I'll say I did my best.
Right. That's exactly right. But the point being here with that, always do your best, there's a very important piece to that.
Okay.
And this goes into how easily we can judge ourselves.
Okay.
And that is that we always do our best, even though it's not our personal best. Because sometimes not sometimes, our best changes every single day.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I may, the night before last, I didn't get to sleep till 4:00 in the morning because of circumstances, and I only had a few hours sleep, and I went to work, and I had a great day at work. Was it my personal best? Perhaps not, but it was the best that I could do under those circumstances, and I know I did my best. However, if I compare myself to the day before, yesterday I did a better job, so yesterday was really my best. Well, under those circumstances, that was my best. So we have to become aware that our best changes, and we can't compare what our personal best is when we're not looking at the circumstances around it.
Right.
That's how we get into trouble and where we get into the
Right.
shame and the blame.
There are people, it's so interesting because to me, so much of this is about how we were raised, and maybe that's the programming piece too. But some people had the parents that if you brought home anything less than an A at school, that you were shamed, and that was unacceptable. And other people had parents in the other extreme that never looked or cared at what a child accomplished or did. And certainly those kinds of programmings in our childhood are going to influence the way that we operate as adults. And if we had to be perfectionists and we had to get everything to feel good about ourselves, to love ourselves or be loved by others, we're going to have a certain level of hyper consciousness. Whereas if anything we did seemed to be accepted and nobody pushed us to quote unquote do our best, then it can be very difficult for an adult who had that upbringing to push themselves to accomplish, and they may not even know how to do it impeccably and with grace. So how does the childhood upbringing influence this always do your best agreement?
Everything.
Okay.
It has everything to do with it. It's in terms of expectations. When you were speaking, the word that was running through my head was the expectations. It's the expectations that we believe that others have of us or that we have of ourselves that makes us so hypercritical, and then we're judging what our best is all the time. But we are little programs. There is no doubt that when a baby is born into this world, they are a clean slate, and they are downloaded by the family that they are born into, their gender, our culture, society, religion, everything gets downloaded. Margaret, your program is completely different than my programming.
Right.
You grew up in a completely different type of home than I grew up in, correct?
Exactly, yes.
So your program is going to be very different. Your expectations or the expectations that your parents had of you are going to be very different than the expectations that my mother had for me.
Right, exactly.
My mother was a single parent, a widow.
Right.
My father died, as I had said last time, when I was 8 years old. So, and you had both of your parents.
Right, yeah.
And so life was very different. I actually put more expectation on myself than my mother actually put on me. I expected more of myself because of my life circumstance and my life situation, whereas other children who were born into with parents into a family that have very high expectations and are very competitive and have that sort of energy going on in their home, the expectations are coming from the outside, whereas some people, the expectations are coming from the inside.
Right, that was my family. I had a very high IQ father and mother. Both were, my father particularly was a intellectual university professor, and he would be astonished. One day I remember as a teenager, he was astonished. "You don't know who Samuel Johnson is? How have I failed you?" So in my world, it was all about, being able to speak well. I kind of rebelled because he was an English professor, and so grammar was very important. He would come out and he would scold when we were playing hide and seek. If we would say me and Lisa, he would say me. I'd say mean Lisa, and he'd go, "Lisa's mean? I didn't know Lisa was mean." And he would change and correct our grammar while we were playing outside. So I hope everyone really could laugh at that one. So yeah,
but some people would take it very personally.
Oh, I laugh at it. And I see also he was
because
a
you
wonderful.
don't believe it.
Well, he was a wonderful one. I mean, he was just an amazing moral person who taught me the impeccability was really important to him. So he was being impeccable with his word. That was it. That was his idea of impeccability, was that you had to speak clearly and you had to have your word be impeccable.
And that was also his belief
His
structure.
belief, yeah, absolutely.
That was his belief. Whereas my mother, who was alone, didn't want me to go off to college. She wanted me to stay home and maybe go to a local school, but she didn't have a lot of high ambition for me because she wanted to have me around because of her life situation. And, I understand that and I have compassion for that, but that wasn't what I wanted.
But in the end, we sort of, in some ways, arrived at the same place through very different journeys. So
exactly
what we're talking about are universal truths that are applicable to no matter what background. Everyone out there listening has had a very different background than either of ours. So, it doesn't matter really how you were programmed as a child. These 5 agreements are absolutely applicable to your life.
But I would like to mention another point of view of Don Miguel's, and that is respect. That we need to respect the way people's programs are. And from my point of view, he calls it, I'm hesitating here because he uses actually a different word. He calls it how we dream. He calls our programs dreams.
I love that. It sort of takes the edge off of it too.
Yeah, so people dream differently, and we have to respect their dream. We don't have to go along with it. We don't have to agree with it. But it is their dream. It is the way that they were brought up. It's the way they see the world. It is their belief systems, and we need to have respect for that, even though it may go completely against what we believe in.
Right.
And if there were more respect in the world, there would be more love, and there would be more caring and compassion. But somebody always has to be right, and somebody always has to be wrong, or it's my way or the highway. And that's where all of this suffering and negativity comes in.
Right, because we try to make someone else adhere to our program.
Because
and
it
we
makes
don't
us feel better.
respect their program.
But we
right?
want everybody to think we do because it makes us feel safe.
It does.
If
yeah.
you disagree with me, then that makes me uncomfortable. So I have to project my point of view even further.
Right. Well, I always say that if you really look at it, every single thing that humans do is done because that particular person in their programming believes that that action that they are taking will make them safer. And we're all trying to make ourselves feel safer, however it is we do it. So if you can
Or
realize...
how destructive.
Right. Well, it can be a destructive. Someone may believe that being safe, certainly a lot of people believe that being safe means that you get bigger guns than the next guy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's certainly a belief system. And they will argue that, to their death. And someone else will say, absolutely not. You have to disarm everyone to be safe. And they will argue it to their death. And what have they done? They've created war in their arguments.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what makes being on this planet Earth so interesting, because we're not with just one program. We're not with just one vibration. We're not just with one point of view. We have the opportunity to share a planet with a multitude of points of view, and it is challenging.
It is challenging, and it's not just the wars outside of us that make us suffer, it's the wars inside of us.
And that's usually, well, for some people, they would, obviously if they're in a war zone, they would say it's the wars outside of themselves right then. But for many of us on a daily basis, it is the war within us that we suffer the most from. So that's why these 4 and 5 agreements, the Don Miguel Ruiz agreements, are there to help us in the challenges and the suffering within us, right? Wouldn't you agree?
I would. And Don Miguel's point of view is that we were not put on this earth to suffer, mm-hmm. that it's our birthright to be happy. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people really are not aware of that, mm-hmm. that it is our birthright to be happy. And we can find happiness even in the midst of suffering. Mm-hmm. We can be in the middle of a war zone and look up and see a rainbow. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, experience pleasure, even if it's just for that moment. Mm-hmm. And it's the ability to be able to find those pleasurable moments, even in the midst of suffering, that can make a difference in your life.
I think and this probably will be something people think about today who are hearing this, that what you're saying is that the dark and the light, or the suffering and the joy, exist simultaneously. They both are
Correct.
here simultaneously.
And where will you put your attention?
And where at that moment are you putting your attention, and where at that moment is your attention being drawn? But just because you're in suffering doesn't mean that the joy went away completely. And just because you're in joy doesn't mean the suffering is gone completely.
Correct.
That both exist simultaneously. And that's very difficult for us to hold that. But I think in many ways that's expressed through that idea of the yin-yang symbol, with the dark and the light side by side, and the little piece of light in the dark and a little piece of dark in the light. That idea of balancing. And we're on a special planet because we have these wide varieties or ranges of emotions and experiences that we can have. And even when our human ego is having trouble with them, we can see that perhaps that our what we call our higher self or our soul is experiencing these things, and there is some growth. I like to say that in everything, if we can get to the gift or the blessing, which I guess is the same idea, if we can find a little piece of that joy, even in the suffering, usually it can diminish the suffering so it doesn't overwhelm us.
As a grief therapist, that is certainly what I'm in service to, is that point of view.
Right.
That even in the midst of suffering, there can also be at the same time some pleasures as well, that we don't have to choose one over the other.
Right.
And
Right.
how we interpret our lives is going to change the quality of it, for sure. And also, in the Chinese language, they're written languages in symbols, and the same symbol for crisis is the same one as opportunity.
Wow, that's amazing. Really, is that true? Is
That is true.
identical?
That is true.
And so depending on the context it's placed in would be how a Chinese person would interpret the symbol?
100% right.
Isn't that interesting? Boy, Western minds would have trouble with that one. Because most people see those as very different things.
But that's exactly the point that we're speaking to today,
Right.
is we have a perception. That symbol, people perceive that symbol as a symbol. How you interpret it is from your life experience.
Yeah, exactly. Isn't that interesting?
And you have the opportunity, really, and the creativity to make that choice. There's a time in our lives that we get to what we call a choice point. I can either interpret it in the dark side or on the light side. Which one can I choose? We have the choice to that. And most people are completely unaware of that truth.
I absolutely can see that. I had a car accident many, many years ago, which ended my career as a dancer, but it began my career as a massage therapist and a healer, and on the spiritual path that I am today. And it brought me to my current husband. So even from the beginning, as hard as it was, I said to myself, I chose this accident. Even though I was hit by a drunk driver at over 100 miles an hour, I had had a premonition of it that it was going to happen, and I had to reconcile somehow, somewhere inside of myself, that a choice had been made. And when I was going through it, it was really hard. But when I look back, I saw the gifts that were given to me by that car accident, that if I had not had it, I probably wouldn't have had the strength to move from that career as a dancer to my new career. I wouldn't have had the strength to change cities, towns, and everything in my life. So sometimes I've learned firsthand these hard knocks can actually move us to a better place.
Right. Can it be a crisis or opportunity? I feel the same way about my life. If my father and sister had not died when I was 8 years old, I would never have been on this path of becoming a grief therapist and being in service to grieving people and doing the work that I do, which I'm so grateful for.
So would you place these things we're talking about under the don't make assumptions agreement?
What about that?
Well, the idea, don't make an assumption that it's a bad thing.
That's right.
But look and say, it again, held within that experience is both the dark and the light, both the bad and the good.
Mm-hmm.
That's really not making an assumption about an experience. And as you're saying, writing a whole story around it from your wounded self.
That's true. That's very true. And as Don Miguel would say, the only thing that we have control over is where we're going to put our attention. Our free will is there's so little that we have free will about, but the free will that we do have is, where am I going to put my attention? Am I going to put it on the negative and interpret it from a negative, poor me victim mentality point of view? Or am I going to look at it as an opportunity to grow and to understand that, okay, here's another path being shown to me. So where am I going to put my attention? I'm laughing inside a little bit because Don Miguel is very funny. And he has a certain way of speaking that really hooks your attention. And one of the things that he says is, where do you want to put your attention? Do you want to smell flowers or do you want to smell poo?
Right.
Pretty much. Where do you want to, which way are you going to look? What do you want to smell? You have that free choice. You have that free will. Your car accident, you had no choice about that in the moment that it happened. My father and sister dying, in that moment, I had no choice. But we've made decisions now and put our awareness in the direction where we needed to be because of that.
Right, because they led us, those experiences led us to something that actually in the end has made our life far richer and far better.
Right,
So
you don't see yourself as a victim because of that.
No, I do
Neither
not.
do I.
Yep.
But we could.
We could, I guess that's true, but that would be a miserable life.
You bet, but how many people, Margaret, how many people do that? And how many people out there in this audience right now who are listening to us, how many of you do that?
Yeah.
How many of you interpret that from the poor me point of view rather than stepping back and saying, wow, I perhaps have another choice of looking at this. Right. I don't have to be at the mercy of that point of view.
Right. And I do think that from my spiritual point of view, I like to believe, again, this is my story and I'm sticking with it. I like to believe that if we do have a certain more positive or uplifting point of view, that the way I put it is I always try to see where is this gift? Where's the hidden gift? Where's the hidden present, the hidden blessing, as best I can. And when I focus there and I find it, it makes me feel empowered and I feel better. And so I guess I want to feel better. So I look for what I can find, but I never deny the fact that something bad has happened or that there is something bad happening. I never deny someone else their pain. I never deny my pain, but I also see that simultaneously with what you said, as the war is going on, there may also be a rainbow over my head. And can I hold both of those simultaneously? Which is an interesting point of view, but one that has so far, my story so far has worked for me.
Right, but I'm imagining that at the time of the accident, you perhaps did not have that point of view.
Well, what was so hard for me, not to get into it right now, was I had a precognitive dream about it the night before. And I had seen the accident as it unfolded, but without the ending. And I woke up feeling that I actually had the opportunity to live or die. And I had said to two people, I think I'm going to die today, but I don't think I'm going to die. I think I have something to learn and I'm strong enough to learn it. And I had actually precognitively had the idea of this coming to me, but it was giving me the opportunity to, and it was a difficult one, and I'm not denying my own pain physically and also emotionally as it changed careers for me. But I also, even before it, had an idea. So as scary as that was for me, I worked with that. And I said, wait a minute, if I had a dream, then I knew, and it just changed me. That's all I'm going to say. We only have a couple minutes, but it did change me. So I have had personal experiences with these ideas in that way.
And I would just like to add to that we're dying all the time. And we have beliefs that need to die so that we can birth new ideas.
Yay.
And we can birth new points of view.
Yay.
And so I would love to just end our program on that note that dying is not such a bad thing in the sense of our belief systems and the things that are holding us back from being happy and living personally free from our past.
And what do they say? Every 7 years, every cell in our body is completely recreated, which means that over the next 7 years, all the thoughts you have and the things you're doing are being imprinted into that whole new cellular structure, and you can have a new lease on life. If
A new dream.
A new dream. So have faith, have hope, have love in your heart, and love yourself. And Shelley and I and our sponsors, Partners in Massage and
New York State Farm
and
Basic Glass Corporation.
thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you today the healing hour. We love you and be
We hope
good.
to see you back here in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.